Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. Starring Eddie Murphy, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Taylor Page, Judge Reinhold, John Ashton, Paul Reiser, Bronson Pinchot, and Kevin Bacon, directed by Mark Malloy. Now, I don't think I've ever seen any of this director's work, but I'm glad to revisit Beverly Hills Cop after all these years, including the first three movies, even if I didn't like the last two. But will this be any better than those two? Well, let's get into it and we'll find out. Axel Foley, returned by Eddie Murphy, drives around and checks on civilians while The Heat Is On is playing, which was a callback to the first film. And Detroit is getting more and more aggressive, and I do like seeing Eddie Murphy back as Axel Foley after too many bombs at this point in his career, as he needs this character in Donkey from Shrek. Rumor has it they're making another one coming out in a couple of years, and his own movie, which in my opinion questionable after the first three movies, as Axel goes to a hockey game with a friend from work named Michael, who's getting a promotion to catch some robbers led by Junior, and he bullshits his way through to get a snowplow and wrecks half the city, while Captain Jeffrey, returned by Paul Reiser from the first movie after all these years later, hearing about it. And is it the same Jeffrey as the first two movies? Well, yes, it is. But it took me my second viewing to realize it was him, and I had to look him up at the same time and said out loud, it is him. Nice reference. And I really like this opening, as I was getting vibes from the first Beverly Hills Cop, but this was equally as entertaining as the first movie. We get the score from this movie quite a few times throughout, as Axel goes into Jeffrey's office, and Jeffrey says he's retiring, while Axel doesn't want him to retire, while Axel's daughter Jane Saunders, played by Taylor Page, is a lawyer, and she meets with Sam Enriquez to defend his case, as he wakes up next to a dead cop named Copeland, as the cops were led to believe Enriquez killed Copeland, and she gets threatened to drop the case or else she's getting killed. And a private detective named Billy Rosewood, returned by Judge Reinhold, checking up on Jane, and she tells him to not tell her father she is threatened or killed, but Billy calls Axel and gets captured by the bad guys after hanging out with Axel. So Axel goes to Beverly Hills, California, and I like the returning as well as the new characters, and the cinematography is much better in Beverly Hills than it is in Detroit, because Detroit looked a little bit much darker, whereas Beverly Hills is much lighter. Axel is in Beverly Hills and gets a rental car because Billy promised him in a previous scene to pick up Axel at the airport, but he didn't show up because he's been captured, and he stops by the office and pretends to act like their boss Beck sent him, as we get a couple of Rambo posters versus merchandise, like the knife from First Blood, and Axel tries to get out of there by stealing a police officer's ticketing car, while another song from the first movie plays in the background, and the lady cop tries to pepper spray Axel in the eyes. And again, another fun sequence that says, so far this movie is fun, but not as fun as the first movie in my opinion. While a couple of lady cops arrest Axel, and another callback from the first film, kind of, and take him to the office, and meets Detective Bobby Abbott, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who I really like this actor, and I'm a fan of his after that movie 50-50, which one day I'll get there, as he interrogates Axel and gives Axel a phone call to Jane, and she hangs up on him twice and tells her for the third time Billy called him the night before, and the relationship works as it has an arc, while Bobby walks in and says Chief John Taggart, returned by John Ashton, wants to see him and have an awkward moment with Axel, and I'm so far having a good time with the movie at this point. Axel sees John as well as Captain Cade Grant, played by Kevin Bacon, as he used to be one of John's cops, while Jane and Bobby talk about her father versus his father, as she bails Axel out, and Axel tells her something is up with Grant, and Jane has no choice but to work with him, as he tells her about why he left her in the first place, because Axel had to deal with the 12-inch mafia, and her mother asked him to get a divorce. And I'm at this point calling bullshit, because there might be some other reasons, but I couldn't say for certain, and stay in Detroit. And they go to an office where an actor from the movie Jupiter Ascending is at, and I didn't recognize this guy. And Jane tells Axel to explain the movie. Axel doesn't explain that movie very well, but to be fair, that was a terrible film. And solve the crime of Copeland's car, and as there's a hidden camera in the air conditioning, and they're looking for an SD card, which was clever, and I'm liking the movie quite a bit. Axel learns something is following them and gets the suspects from Billy's office, and the bad guys find their tracking device on a school bus while a kid flips off the bad guys. And I was thinking, oh my god, that is just bad. Don't teach your kids things like that in an early age. I mean, Jesus. Axel brings up the difference between Saunders, which is Jane's last name, and Foley, which is Axel's last name, if anybody doesn't know that. And they stop at a private club and go upstairs, and they find Grant at a party. And after his introduction, I knew he was going to play the villain in the movie, because why else would you hire Kevin Bacon in a big movie like this other than to play a villain, which was predictable for damn sure. As at this point, I was thinking, this motherfucker is evil, and he dismisses them. Kevin Bacon does a good job at playing a villain roles from movies like Hollow Man to, even though that wasn't a good movie, to X-Men First Class, to hell, even this movie. And I was thinking, is he the villain in Maxine? As I haven't gotten to that movie yet, but he plays evil well. Jane drops Axel at his rental car, and she takes off and says something regretful things and leaves Billy another message and stays at the hotel from the first movie, which was a nice callback. As next day comes and Axel goes to Jane's office disguised as Red Michaels and shows her an address that was heavily guarded, and Axel tells Jane about something is up with those motherfuckers. Meanwhile, John sees Bobby about the Copeland case, and Bobby says the case is getting interesting, and he finds Axel and Jane getting ambushed by some bad guys. And Bobby comes in and helps them out, and the action in this movie was a hell of a lot of fun. Axel goes back to the Beverly Hills Police Department and chats about he and Jane, with Bobby and Jane, I should say, and she doesn't want to date a cop, and they solve the case together while John calls Axel to his office, and I like the arcs of each character, even Jane and Bobby. John talks with Axel as Axel says maybe Enriquez is innocent, and the reason why Billy quit the police because of how innocent he is, and tells Bobby he's suspended from the police force, as Axel realizes he's on his own, and Bobby wants to help Axel and Jane solve the case as they start by going to Jane's office, and they learn they're selling a house where the bad guys are selling, and they bring in Serge, returned by Bronson Pinchot, forgive me if I said that wrong earlier and now, as he has a hard time saying people's names like Bobby's last name because of his accent. And Serge brings Axel, Jane, and Bobby to the house where Axel is the father-in-law of Jane and Bobby, who's husband and wife, and that house is beautiful, and we get some callbacks to the first film while Axel sneaks around the house, and the callbacks are very funny in this movie. Grant learns Axel was at the house, while Axel, Jane, and Bobby go back to the hotel, and Jane picks a fight with Axel after they have to find Billy, and she believes it's all about Axel Foley, and says some things she'll regret later in the film. And Bobby tells Axel about what happened with his father and how sorry he is, and as Axel thinks about it for the rest of the movie, as Axel and Bobby go to the club of Cholino Valdemoro, forgive me if I said that wrong, played by Luis Guzman, and they tell him his nephew Enriquez is innocent, and Grant set him up. And I like seeing Luis Guzman, as I haven't seen him in a movie in some time, and I'm talking about recently, not so much as anything I might have reviewed him in recently. Now, and it's nice to see him work in a movie again, and they learn Billy is at a place where some shit is going down, like a delivery, and Grant comes by and arrests Axel and Bobby for having drugs in his trunk, which doesn't belong to him, and Axel is interrogated by Grant, and the dialogue is working for a sequel to a movie from the 1980s. Not too many of those nowadays. Axel escapes by pretending he went through the roof when he was hiding under the table, and escapes and knocks out Grant, and he gets Bobby out, as well as, which is genius of Axel to do that. as it was clever, and they go on the run after Grant wakes up and Axel gets the idea of Bobby flying a helicopter in the roof. While he was led to believe he was a pilot and crashed a helicopter in the past, and the way Bobby and Axel get nervous and yell at one another was cracking me up as it was hysterical. And John comes by the Beverly Hills Police Department and comes out the front and sees Grant is the bad guy. We, the audience, knew the whole fucking time. And they land on the golf course and encounter Christopher McDonald and pretends a person is dying, which was hilarious to see Christopher McDonald in a golf course because he might be coming back to the Happy Gilmore, and there is a sequel to that movie coming to Netflix sometime soon, as they take those golf vehicles to try to get out of the private golf course, which was a great cameo by Christopher McDonald, in my opinion, as far as golfing is concerned. Jane visits John at the police department, and the next scene, Jane gets captured by Grant's henchmen while Axel and Bobby go to the factory and rescue Billy, and they get him out, and his obsession with action movies comes out rising again by picking up a machine gun and steal a gun and gets chased by Grant's bad guys. And Billy says he hid this SD card on the knife from First Blood, aka Rambo. And he calls Jane, and Grant has her captured as Axel asks Jeffrey to track down Jane's phone, and he does, I should rephrase that, and Axel thinks of calling for backup by crashing a police car with an open door, and the backup chases after Axel, Billy, and Bobby. For some reason, they lose them, which did make me laugh as a climax while Jane torments Grant while her father will fuck him up, until Axel crashes at the mansion as they have a final shootout with John coming to their location with a shotgun and helping Billy out with a callback from the first movie while Billy stands out and says, "Police, you're all under arrest." And I had a laugh because that was cracking me up because that was in the first movie. Jane gets herself a way out of handcuffs like Axel did twice earlier in the film while Axel approaches Grant, as Axel almost gets killed until Jane comes in and he jumps in to save her life. And Bobby shoots Grant dead, and John apologizes to Billy while Axel goes to the hospital, and while he's there, he can't eat the food at the hospital as he goes to the burger joint across the street, and Jane visits him there, and Axel says how sorry he is for failing Jane as a father, and she does the same thing and walks him back to the hospital. In the last scene before credits roll, John now demoted, and Billy back on the force wait for Axel to leave the hospital, and Axel goes to the back seat and wants to take them to get a steak, and it ends with Axel saying, "This is going to be fantastic, trust me," and smiles like at the end of the first movie, and this climax entertained me as this whole movie did at the end of the day. Now it's time for my rating. I'll give this movie a 7.0 out of 10. I really like the returning as well as the new characters, as I had a fun time with the movie from start to finish, as this isn't as fun nor good as the first Beverly Hills Cop, but it's much better than 2 and 3, so that makes this the second best of the series. The action was nice and fun in that original movie, and the character arcs were good from all the characters, old and new, as this movie is all about having fun with it. And at the end of the day, I absolutely did, as Kevin Bacon plays a damn good villain. From Hollow Man to X-Men First Class to here, and maybe Maxine, which I won't talk about till I get to that review. The callbacks are very funny, as I had a good time with the sequel, and that is second best compared to the original, in my opinion. And this is a recommendation, as this cracked me up, and at the end of the day, I would watch this as a Beverly Hills Cop movie. Despite the first one, I'll watch any time of the day. But this was fun also. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for returning to Beverly Hills Cop. And until we ever get another one, because there's rumors there's coming.